The screams behind the metal walls. The desert was silent, except for the soft crunch of sand under Cade's boots. The wind was dry, sharp, and carried the scent of rust and oil. He had followed a broken signal from his scanner, expecting a crashed drone or maybe alien scrap he could sell, but what he found was something far worse. Half buried in the sand stood a massive door made of black metal, cold to the touch. It didn't belong to any human design he knew. It looked old, abandoned, but to clean, something about it felt wrong. He pressed his ear to the door and waited. At first, there was only silence. Then he heard it, screaming, not wild beast sounds or electronic distortion. These were real voices, echoing from somewhere deep inside. They weren't shouting words, just pain. Terrible, raw pain. Cade stepped back, heart pounding. He should have walked away. He should have turned around and pretended he never found this place. But his legs moved on their own. He found a control panel hidden under a layer of dust. It blinked faintly, still active. He pressed a few buttons, and the heavy door hissed open. Cold air rushed out, thick with the smell of blood and something worse, chemical rot. He entered with one hand on his blaster, eyes scanning every shadow. Lights flickered above him, casting shaky beams across rusted walls and stained floors. There were no bodies but trails, drag marks, claw marks. Something big had moved through. Here recently, a loud clang echoed from the left hallway. Cade froze, weapon ready. Then another noise followed, not a threat, a whisper, weak and trembling. Please. Someone. He followed the voice to a large chamber filled with glass cages. Most were broken, empty, filled with shredded bedding and metal chains. Only one cage still held something or someone. Inside was a girl, alien but young, with glowing blue skin and deep cuts on her arms and legs. She stared at him without fear. In fact, she looked almost relieved. Cade stepped closer, uncertain. You human? She asked, voice shaking. He nodded slowly. Yes, and you? She coughed and tried to sit up, but chains pulled her back. They made me, hurt me, tried to change me, she whispered. But I stayed me. Cade didn't know what she meant. He didn't care about alien problems. He was just a scavenger. But then she said something that froze his blood. Use me, hurt me just. Don't leave me here. Her eyes pleaded with him, wide and wet. She wasn't begging for freedom. She was begging not to be abandoned. Cade stepped back, unsure what to say. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. He looked around the chamber again. On the walls were symbols, Drenthic runes. Cade knew that name. Genetic masters, cruel scientists, outlawed across the galaxy for making weapons out of living beings. What is this place? He asked, his voice low. A test house, she replied. They called it Joy Lab, but it was only pain. She lifted her arm, showing him the scars. They wanted to break us, build us, sell us. Cade turned to leave, overwhelmed. He wasn't a hero. This wasn't his problem. But then the door slammed shut behind him with a crash. Metal sealed over it, locking him in. Red lights began to flash, and a deep alarm rang through the halls. The girl looked up, panic flooding her face. No. Not now, not again, she cried. There awake, Cade pulled his blaster and aimed at the shadows. What's awake? He asked. The others. She said, voice shaking. The ones who failed. A loud screech echoed through the halls, followed by rapid thudding across the ceiling. Something crawled fast, unseen. Cade cursed under his breath. This wasn't a lab, it was a slaughterhouse. And now he was locked inside with things that should never have existed. The girl reached her chained hands out toward him. I can help you get out, she said. But you have to free me first. He hesitated. She looked weak, broken, but those eyes, those weren't the eyes of a liar. She was scared, but not for herself, for him. He stepped closer and raised his blaster to the lock on her cage. He had no idea what he was doing, only that leaving her behind was no longer an option. The screams in the distance grew louder. The facility had awakened, and Cade had just made his first choice in a war he didn't understand yet. He fired, and the cage burst open with a spark. The girl stumbled into his arms and whispered, "Thank you, human. Now run," and they did, together. Into the metal maze full of monsters. Asterisk, who would build a place like this? The hallway ahead was dark and cold, with metal floors that echoed every step Cade took. Thera stayed close behind him, still limping from her injuries. Her eyes darted from shadow to shadow, like she expected something to crawl out of the walls. At any moment, Cade gripped his blaster tightly. But he knew it wouldn't be enough if things got worse. He had questions. Too many. What was this place? Who built it, and why? But right now, survival mattered more than answers. A sudden hiss came from a ceiling vent above. Cade aimed up, but nothing jumped. Thera pulled at his sleeve and whispered, "They're watching, but they don't attack when we move fast." Cade didn't ask how she knew. He just started running, and she followed. They turned a corner and entered a wide chamber, filled with old medical machines and thick glass tubes. Most were cracked or empty, but some still bubbled with strange liquid. Inside one was a half-formed creature human-sized, but with long claws and no face. Cade stared at it in horror. "What the hell is this place?" he muttered. Thera looked at the ground, ashamed. "A lab built by the Drenthok," she said. "They called it a joy factory, but there was no joy here." Her voice was soft. "Almost broken, they tested pain, trained bodies, erased minds." Cade wanted to believe she was exaggerating, but the smell, the bloodstains, the broken tool set all felt too real. He touched one of the metal tables and saw grooves carved into the sides, claw marks. Whoever was here didn't leave quietly. Why? "Were you here?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. Thera sat on a crate and hugged her knees. "They created me from 3 species," she said. "One for strength, one for beauty, one for obedience." Her eyes met his, filled with guilt. "I was supposed to seduce, then kill, over and over, without question." Cade stepped back slightly. "And did you?" She shook her head. Quickly, "I failed," she said. "I cried, screamed, refused orders." She pointed at the scars on her arms. "They punished me until I stopped reacting." Silence filled the room. Kay didn't know what to say. She looked young, no more than 20 in human years, but her eyes had seen more pain than most soldiers. From the ceiling, a soft tapping echoed again, not loud, but fast like fingers drumming metal. Thera stiffened. "They're close now," she said. "We need to move." Cade helped her up, and they ran again, through a tunnel filled with blinking screens. A strange voice echoed from a nearby speaker. Subject 42 escaped. Subject 42 corrupted. Begin cleansing procedure. The lights turned red, and a metal gate slammed down behind them, sealing their path back. Thera gasped. "That's me, they mean me." Cade turned toward her. "You're number 42. She nodded slowly. "They think I'm still property." Before he could reply, a grinding sound came from a sealed door on their right. Cade pointed at it. "Does that lead out?" Thera's face turned pale blue, her species' version of fear. "No, that leads to the discarded ones," she said. "We can't go that way." Another screech rang behind them, closer this time. No time to argue. Cade dragged her to the door and forced it open with his blaster. Smoke poured out, thick and hot. Burning his lungs, inside was darkness. Deeper than the rest of the complex, the smell was worse: wet fur, rotting skin, electricity. Thera pulled his arm with more strength than he expected. "We should have died back there," she whispered, "but you came." Cade didn't know why he helped her. Maybe because she didn't lie. Maybe because he saw something in hers, something human, despite the alien skin. Or maybe, deep down, he was tired of running from other people's problems. He led her through. The dark passed open cages and chewed metal bars. They weren't alone. From above, glowing eyes tracked their every step. Shapes shifted in the shadows tall. Hunched, twitching, Cade whispered, "If they attack, what do we do?" Thera replied with a trembling voice, "We run faster," but they were already surrounded. Cade raised his weapon, but Thera stepped in front of him. She held out her hands and screamed something in her native tongue. The creatures froze. They didn't charge, didn't roar. They just watched. Cade was breathing hard, heart racing. "What did you say?" he asked. Thera turned to him with a strange expression. Part fear, part sadness. "I told them I was broken." "Just like them," she said, and they listened. Cade didn't understand it, but one thing was clear. Thera wasn't just another test subject. She was something more, something the Drenthok feared. Now he had to decide: leave her and try to survive, or stay and fight whatever came next with her at his side. He looked at her one last time and said, "Let's go. We're not done yet," and this time she followed without fear. The hybrids that shouldn't exist. Cade stepped carefully. Blaster raised, his boots crunching over scattered bones and broken glass. The air was thick now, almost solid, heavy with chemicals and something worse, something alive. Thera walked beside him without speaking, her eyes scanning the ceiling, the walls, even the floor. This part of the facility was wrong in a new way. The other areas had blood and cages and machines. But here, the walls pulsed slightly, like they were breathing. Green lights flickered across control panels that seemed to move on their own. Something had been built here, then abandoned, left to rot or grow. What was this? Cade whispered. Thera didn't answer at first. She touched one of the walls with her hand and winced. "This is where they made the first ones," she finally said. The true hybrids. Cade had heard rumors long ago about black labs and illegal science. He thought they were ghost stories designed to scare kids from exploring old war bunkers. But now he was walking inside one, and the ghosts here still breathed. They entered a circular chamber where huge pods lined the walls. Each pod was filled with liquid and a shadowy figure floating inside. Some looked human, some didn't. Most were incomplete, missing eyes or hands or skin. Why would they make these? Cade asked. Thera lowered her head. The Drenthok believed war could be perfected, she said, but they failed to understand life. She pointed to a nearby terminal. This one was designed to love orders, not people. Cade read the file on the screen. It showed a creature with 3 arms, emotion dampeners, and an injected loyalty trigger. It never left the pod, self-terminated during thought simulation, suicide. Cade asked, shocked. Thera nodded slowly. Even engineered minds can feel pain, suddenly. A soft thud echoed across the chamber. One of the pods had moved, then another. Cade stepped back, eyes locked on the glass. A hybrid inside began to twitch its claws, tapping the pod's edge. Then its eyes opened, glowing red in the dark liquid. "Thera," he whispered, "it's waking up." She pulled him behind one of the machines and hissed. "They're not fully stable," she said, "but sometimes the lab triggers a wake-up sequence if someone with my DNA gets too close." The pod hissed and opened with a blast of steam. The creature dropped to the floor, slick with fluid, moving like a shadow. Its face was flat, but its head snapped toward the noise of their breathing. Cade gripped his blaster, but Thera stopped him. "Wait," she said, stepping out slowly with her hands up. The hybrid tilted its head like a curious child. Thera spoke in soft tones, a mix of her language and galactic basic. She called it brother. It sniffed the air, blinked twice, then snarled. It lunged, fast and low, but not at her, at Cade. He fired the blaster. Shot ripping through its side, it crashed into a wall and vanished into the shadows with a scream. Why did it attack me? Cade asked, breathing hard. Thera looked guilty. They're made to hate anything not like them, she said. And you're human. More pods hissed around them. 2 more opened. Then a third. Thera ran to the control panel and started pressing. Buttons. We can overload the power core in this wing niddle. Disable the clones temporarily. Cade wanted to run, but the hybrids were already moving through the fog like hunters. Kay watched as Thera worked, her fingers fast despite her. Trembling hands. You sure this won't kill us too? She didn't look up. 50-50. He sighed. Great odds. A hybrid leaped toward them. But this time Cade was ready. He shot it midair, sending it tumbling to the ground. Another charged. But Thera pressed the final button and the walls screamed, not alarm sirens, real screams. The lab cried out like it was alive. Then the lights flashed and sparks burst from the walls. The hybrids fell, convulsing, their bodies twitching under the failing system. Smoke filled the room. And the ceiling began to crack. Cade grabbed Thera's hand and ran toward the emergency exit door. Metal groaned above them as they passed falling lights and sparking wires. Behind them, the chamber collapsed, burying the hybrids beneath rubble and fire. They burst out into a quieter hallway. Coughing and covered in dust, Cade dropped to one knee, gasping for air. Thera fell beside him, her face pale and wet with sweat. You saved us, he said. She didn't reply at first, just stared at the closed door behind them. No, she whispered. I saved them from themselves. Cade looked at her again, not as a stranger this time. She wasn't just another test subject or some tragic lab rat. She had risked her life for hybrids that would have killed her. She had something the scientists never planned for compassion. We need to keep moving, she said. This place has more secrets than we've seen. Cade stood and offered her his hand. Then we'll find every one of them. And they walked deeper into the lab, not as prisoner and scavenger, but as a team forged by pain and fire. Asterisk, they want her back. Sunlight burned their eyes as Cade and Thera stepped out of the lab's final exit hatch. Behind them, the slaughterhouse was silent again, buried under stone. Smoke and forgotten screams. Cade dropped to the sand, breathing deep, the desert heat suddenly feeling cleaner than recycled air. Thera didn't sit. She stared at the sky. Her body tense, her face grim. They're coming, she whispered. Cade looked up too, but saw nothing. Just the blue sky and the red sun. Who's coming? He asked. Thera turned to him, her voice shaking. The Dren thought Cade's blood ran cold. You said this place was abandoned, he said. She nodded, slowly. It was, but if they know I escaped, they won't let me go far. Cade cursed, and opened his comlink, calling his ship parked 5 kilometers away. It would take 15 minutes to get there, maybe more. He looked at the Rushi, was swaying slightly, one hand clutching her side. You all right? No, she said. They put a tracker in me deep. Her legs gave out and she fell to her knees, gasping. Cade rushed to her side and caught her before she collapsed. She was burning up, her skin, which was normally cool to the touch, was now hot like fire. They activated it, she whispered. I can feel it melting me from the inside. Cade didn't hesitate. He pulled a medkit from his pack and scanned her vitals. Numbers flashed red and yellow and stable. Internal damage, toxin release. This was built in, he said. Jaw tight, like a kill switch. Thera's eyes fluttered. They didn't just make me to obey, she said. They made me to die if I disobeyed. Cade picked her up in both arms. No way I'm letting them win like that. He ran across the dunes with her in his arms, every step pounding into the sand. Behind them, the sky cracked with thunder. Even though there were no clouds, a ship, massive and black, tore through the upper atmosphere like a blade. The Drenthok had arrived. Cade's ship beeped on his wrist. Scannerit had reached the extraction point. They just needed to get there. Before the Drenthok's landing party hit the ground, Cade kept running, ignoring the pain in his legs. The weight of Thera in his arms. He wouldn't leave her. Not after what she'd survived. Missiles screamed overhead, blasting the dunes behind them. Sending sand into the sky, Thera coughed blood. Barely awake. "Just leave me," she whispered. "You'll die if you carry me." Cade didn't stop running. "If I drop you, I die anyway." They reached the ridge where his ship waited. Engines hot and doors wide open. Cade jumped inside and sealed the hatch just as a shadow passed overhead. Blaster fire slammed into the outer hull, rocking the ship. Cade strapped Thera in and ran to the cockpit. The ship rose fast, cutting through the sky while dodging laser shots and EMP bursts. Cade pushed the thrusters to max and punched through the atmosphere. He gritted his teeth as warning lights blinked red to much heat. Too fast ascent, but they had no choice. The moment they broke through the clouds, silence returned. Stars greeted them, cold and distant. Thera gasped, her breath thin, her hands trembling. Cade turned to her. "We're out," he said. "For now." But Thera didn't smile. "They'll chase us," she whispered. "They don't give up what they build." Cade opened a secure comm channel and sent a coded message to someone he hadn't contacted in years. An old rebel doctor with a grudge against the Drenthok, and no love for human governments either. If anyone could save Thera, it was him. The ship jumped into hyperspace, leaving the planet behind. Cade sat beside her, holding her hand as she trembled. In silence, she looked at him and said something he didn't expect. "Thank you for not using me." Cade didn't speak right away. "I didn't save you because I felt sorry," he finally said. "I saved you because you're worth saving." Her eyes filled with something that looked like hope, or maybe disbelief. They arrived at an old mining station orbiting a dead moon now, a hidden medical bay used by outlaw scientists. The rebel doctor was waiting, bald, covered in grease, and furious. "You brought me a ticking bomb," he said, scanning Thera's body. "She's not a bomb," Cade replied. "She's someone worth saving." The doctor grunted. "Well, she's dying unless I remove the implant, and that means digging into her spine blind." "Do it," Cade said. "She might not survive," the doctor warned. Cade looked at Thera, then back at him. "She survived." Thera reached for Cade's hand as they wheeled her away. Her grip was weak, but her voice was clear. "No matter what happens, thank you for seeing me." Not just what they made me. Cade stood alone as the door closed. Outside, stars drifted in silence. Inside, a human waited while an alien girl fought to stay alive, not because someone told her to, but because, for the first time, she wanted to. The human stand Cade sat in the cold hallway of the hidden rebel outpost. His eyes locked on the blinking light above the surgery door. He had fought creatures in the dark, run through explosions, and carried Thera across deserts. But this was the hardest part, waiting, doing nothing while someone else tried to save her life. Every beep of the monitor felt like a countdown. The rebel doctor had said the spinal implant was fused with her nervous system. Removing it could paralyze her or worse, but keeping it meant she was one signal away from death. Cade had made the choice, and now he had to live with it. The door finally hissed open, and the doctor stepped out. Removing bloody gloves, Cade stood quickly, his heart pounding. "She's alive," the doctor said. "Barely, but alive." Cade exhaled and leaned against the wall. "She's strong," he whispered. "She need to be." The doctor replied, "They'll come for her again." 2 hours later, Thera opened her eyes, blinking at the lights above her body. Felt different, lighter, weaker, but cleaner. The constant pressure in her head was gone. She turned and saw Cade beside her, asleep in the chair. She reached out with shaking fingers and touched his arm. He jolted awake, then smiled when he saw her. "You made it," he said. "I didn't want to die," she whispered. "Not before I understood who I really am." Cade helped her sit up slowly, placing pillows behind her back. "You're free now," he said. "They can't control you anymore." She smiled weakly. "That's the scariest part." The doctor returned with test results. "She need time to heal," he said, "but she's stable." He handed Cade a data chip. "This holds everything we pulled from her body design blueprints, protocols, weakness logs." Cade stared at the chip. "We can use this," he said. "We can expose the Drenthok," but the doctor frowned. "That's why they'll come for her and you?" Cade nodded. "Then let them." They moved Thera to a small room near the back of the station, one with a view of the stars. She watched them quietly each night, trying to understand freedom. Not a command, not a mission. Not survival, but real freedom. It still felt unreal. Cade spent most of his time preparing defenses, contacting allies, and running simulations. He knew the Drenthok wouldn't just walk away. Thera wasn't just a weapon to them. She was proof of their failure, and they couldn't allow that to exist. One night, as Cade tightened a plasma coil on the outer gate, Thera approached him. She was still limping, but stronger each day. "You're preparing for war," she said. "I'm preparing to protect you," he replied. She looked at the stars, then at him. "Do you think I'm worth all this?" He turned to her, face serious. "I don't think," he said. "I know." Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but something else, something she'd never felt before. Belonging. She reached out and held his hand. "For so long, I believed I had no right to choose," she said, "but now I want to choose to fight." Cade didn't stop her. He trained her in human combatrial tactics, real strength, not pain conditioning. She learned quickly, almost too quickly. But her movements were different now, not mechanical, not perfect, just real. The other rebels started to respect her, even trust her. She laughed for the first time while sparring with Cade, falling on the mat and giggling like a child. "I didn't know I could do that," she said. "Do what?" "Feel joy without hurting something." But time was short. A warning beacon flared from the outer sensor. A-ray ships had entered the system. Not pirates, not traitors. Cade gathered the team and showed them the data chip. "This is what they want," he said, "but they don't get it without stepping over all of us." The rebels didn't flinch. They had fought worse. Odds and now they had a cause. Thera stood beside Cade in full armor, her glowing blue skin exposed. Around her neck and hands, she didn't hide anymore. "They wanted me to be silent," she said. "Now they'll hear my voice loud and clear." The ships entered orbit, dark and massive. Cade activated the defense grid, the cannons humming with power. They were outnumbered. Outgunned, but not outmatched, not with Thera on their side. Cade looked at her one last time before the first shot was fired. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "I know," she replied, her voice calm. "But I want to." The Drenthok thought she was just a weapon, but now she was something they never expected, free, angry, and loved. And she was about to show them what that really meant. Asterisk. When a weapon finds its soul, the battle began without warning. A flash of light split the sky as the Drenthok ships launched their first wave. The rebel station shook, steel groaning under the pressure of direct hits inside the command room. Alarms wailed and the air turned thick with tension. Cade stood at the control panel, issuing orders, eyes locked on the defense grid. Missile turrets roared to life, firing into space, striking the enemy with wild precision. But it wasn't enough. More enemy pods were falling, metal shells full of Drenthok hunters, bred for killing. Thera stood at the edge of the hangar in full armor, her hands trembling not from fear, but from focus. This was the moment they built her for. This was the moment she chose for herself. She turned to Cade and said, "I'm not their creation anymore. My own." He nodded once, handing her a pulse blade and a sidearm. "Then let's make them regret trying to take you back." The station's outer corridor exploded inward as boarding parties broke through. Drenthic soldiers rushed in, armored and cold, their movements perfect like machines. Thera stepped into their path without hesitation. Her body moved faster than theirs, graceful, brutal, alive. She dropped the first soldier with a single spin, slicing through armor and bone. The others hesitated, not expecting resistance from one of their own. But Thera didn't stop. She became a blur of motion, dodging, striking, outsmarting their programming. Behind her, Cade fought with his team, blasters lighting the hall. He moved with focus, keeping one eye on her, watching not just a fighter but a soul waking up. The Drenthok commander watched from his command ship above. His voice came through Thera's neural implant receiver, though the implant had been destroyed. He tried anyway. "Return, Subject 42. This is your function, your destiny." Thera ignored it and pulled off her helmet, letting her voice carry through the open channel. "My name is Thera, and I choose my own fate." She charged through the final wall of soldiers and reached the generator core where the boarding beacon pulsed. If she destroyed it, reinforcements couldn't land. But the last Guardian stood in her Wayan Alpha hybrid, massive and silent. It looked at her like a mirror, same eyes, same scars, same twisted history. "I don't want to fight you," she said softly. The hybrid said nothing, only raised its weapon. Thera stepped forward slowly. "We were made to kill, but I was shown something else, someone else." The hybrid twitched, confused. It hesitated for just a second. That was enough. Thera surged forward and struck not to kill, but to disable. She jammed her blade into its power pack, sparking a short circuit that dropped it to the ground. She looked down at it and whispered, "You don't have to die in chains." Then she turned and destroyed the beacon. The explosion lighting up the sky, the enemy ships blinked on Cade's screen, disoriented without ground support. The rebel cannons locked on. One by one, the invaders were blown apart. The sky turned quiet again. Smoke drifted through the station. Fires dimming, bodies silent. Cade walked through the ruins, blaster lowered, looking for her. He found her at the core room, kneeling beside the fallen hybrid. She looked up when she saw him and smiled faintly. "You did it," he said. "We did it." She replied. Together, she stood slowly, body bruised but heart light. "I never thought I'd feel this again," she said. "The fight ended, and I didn't feel empty." Cade placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because you weren't fighting for them this time," he said. "You were fighting for you." That night, the stars were bright again. The rebels repaired the station, and the system declared the Drenthok attack a violation of galactic law. But more than that, stories began to spread. Stories of a girl who was once a weapon, now a protector. Thera stood on the viewing deck, arms folded, watching the stars without fear. Cade joined her, silent for a moment, then spoke. "They'll come again someday." She nodded. "Let them. I know who I am now." He turned to her, smiling. Not their tool, not their slave, not their failure. She looked into his eyes. "No," she said. "I'm Thera, and I belong to no one." And for the first time since her creation, she felt whole. She fought for him, not for war. Peace didn't come with silence. It came with hard work, metal repairs, fuel shortages, and long nights watching the scanners. But for the first time, Cade and Thera weren't running, hiding, or bleeding. They were building something. The rebel station became a sanctuary for survivors, defectors, and lost hybrids. Word spread fast. There was a place where even engineered weapons could rest. Thera led with calm hands and sharp eyes. She trained others, like her, not to fight, but to heal, but peace, as always, was temporary. One morning, the long-range sensors picked up a message, not from the Drenthok, but from the Galactic Assembly. They had heard whispers about Thera. They wanted her to speak before them. Kay didn't trust politics. But Thera stood tall, armor off, wearing simple robes stitched by the station's refugees. "I won't ask them to fight," she said. "I'll ask them to remember we're still people." He flew her to the assembly core on his own ship, the same ship that once carried her broken body across the desert. Now she walked onto the ground floor with her head held high. Thousands of delegates stared at her, unsure whether to fear her or listen. She told her story, not with anger, but with clarity. She spoke of pain, of programming, of resistance. She told them about Cadnot, just a human, but the first person who saw her as more than a tool, and when she finished, the room was silent. Then they stood, all of them, a full assembly applause echoing across the chamber like thunder. In that moment, she was no longer a number. She was a symbol of choice. When she returned to the station, things had changed. The Drenthok went quiet. Pushed back by pressure from galactic forces, the hybrids began to dream, and Cade finally let himself believe in something again. He stood with her one night under the stars, both of them leaning on the same railing where this all began. She turned to him and asked, "Why did you help me back then?" He thought for a moment, then replied, "Because you begged me not to leave you." She laughed, soft and honest. "And now?" He looked at her, not just with admiration, but something deeper. "Now, I'd never let you go." She took his hand without hesitation. The girl who once begged to be used now held herself with pride. Not because someone saved her, but because someone believed she could save herself. War taught her how to kill, but love taught her why to live, and in the end, she didn't fight to destroy the past. She fought to build a future one, where even weapons could choose peace. That night, in the quiet of the stars, Cade whispered one last truth to her. "You don't belong to anyone." She smiled and leaned into his shoulder. "I know," she said, "but I choose to belong with you, and that choice, freely made, was more powerful than any weapon ever built."